All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into just one single sentence from Japan's prime minister that sent, absolute shockwaves across Asia. It's wild to think about, but in just a single moment, it felt like decades of super carefully crafted diplomatic silence just vanished. So what exactly was said, and why was it such a big deal?
Okay, this was it. This was the statement from Prime Minister Takaichi, said right in Parliament, that just completely shattered the old diplomatic playbook. So let's get into it. To really understand why everyone reacted the way they did, you first have to get your head around this really powerful legal phrase that's at the absolute heart of the whole controversy.
And the whole key is right there in those three words: survival-threatening situation. Now, this isn't just some political jargon or a turn of phrase. No, this is a very specific legal trigger, and it has massive consequences for Japan's military.
So to really get what's going on, we got to rewind the clock a bit, back to 2015. See, that's when there was this huge shift in Japanese security law, and it introduced the very framework that makes this one statement so explosive.
For decades, and I mean decades, Japan's constitution was understood to mean its military could only act if Japan itself was directly attacked, period. But then, the 2015 laws brought in this totally new concept, sonritsu kikijitai, or what we're calling it, a survival-threatening situation. This is what allows Japan to use force to defend a key ally, but, and this is a big but, only under very specific circumstances. This fundamentally changed the entire rulebook.
And here's where it gets kind of fascinating, actually. In Japan, before the military, the self-defense forces, can do anything, the government has to officially recognize and legally define what's happening. It's almost like in the movie Shin Godzilla, remember that? Before they could fight the monster, the politicians had to have all these meetings just to legally classify it. It sounds a little crazy, but that situation recognition is an absolutely critical first step.
And listen, this is not an easy trigger to pull, not at all. The law lays out these three super strict conditions, and every single one of them has to be met. So, an attack on an ally way off on the other side of the world, that's not going to cut it. It has to create a real, existential threat to Japan's survival and pose a clear and present danger to the Japanese people themselves. So the really crucial point here is that talking this directly is totally new. For years and years, Japan's official strategy when it came to a potential conflict over Taiwan was basically to say, well, as little as possible. Let's actually take a look at how they used to do things.
You can just see the shift so perfectly here. On one side, you've got the old playbook, right? This is what guys like former Prime Minister Suga and Kishida did. Strategic ambiguity. They would give these deliberately vague, non-committal answers to avoid drawing any red lines in the sand. But then, on the other side, you've got this newfound clarity. Prime Minister Takaichi's statement just connects specific actions directly to that legal trigger. It's a night and day difference.
So the big question is, why? Why was being vague the default strategy for so long? What was the point of avoiding a straight answer?
Well, it was all part of this very carefully calculated diplomatic balancing act. That vagueness, it was there for a reason. First, to avoid provoking China. Second, to keep all their diplomatic options open. And third, to stick to Japan's official position, which goes all the way back to 1972, that it respects China's claim over Taiwan.
Okay, but here's where there's a really common misunderstanding about what was actually said, and maybe more importantly, what was left out of that soundbite that went everywhere. We've got to read between the lines a little bit.
Right. So this is the question on everyone's mind, right? Does this mean Japan just promised to defend Taiwan directly? And, well, the answer is a lot more complicated than a simple yes or no. The way most people heard it, they're actually missing the most critical piece of the whole puzzle. Because, you see, the statement wasn't really about defending Taiwan, at least not in the direct way you might think.
Okay, so here is the crucial context. That close ally mentioned in the law, everyone understands that to mean the United States. And the scenario the Prime Minister was actually talking about, the part that got cut out of a lot of clips, is one where the U.S. intervenes in a Taiwan conflict first. The survival-threatening situation for Japan would kick in if China then attacks those American forces. And since there are a ton of U.S. bases in Japan, you can see how that could escalate really quickly. So at the end of the day, it's not about Japan defending Taiwan directly. It's about Japan defending itself and the U.S. if the fight spills over and lands on their doorstep.
But look, even with all that crucial context, you know how it goes. The nuance was completely lost in the headlines. And that shift from total ambiguity to even just a little bit of clarity had immediate and serious consequences.
Yeah, China's reaction was swift and it was strong. From Beijing's point of view, Taiwan is part of China, period.
So any talk from another country about getting involved militarily is seen as interference in their internal business. And that's exactly how they interpreted the Prime Minister's statement, as Japan basically saying it was going to get involved.
This timeline really puts it all into perspective, doesn't it? You've got that 1972 agreement that set the diplomatic baseline for 50 years. Then, in 2015, you get this whole new legal framework. And now, for the very first time, a top leader has explicitly connected that new law to a Taiwan scenario. It's a huge break from decades of tradition.
You can bet the government immediately went into damage control mode. Japan's foreign ministry rushed out to try and reassure everyone, especially China, that the government's official diplomatic position hadn't actually changed. But, it was kind of too late. The cat was out of the bag. The line, even if it was a conditional one, had been drawn out loud for the whole world to hear.
So, what's the big takeaway here? Was this just an accidental slip of the tongue? A gaffe that revealed what they were really thinking behind closed doors? Or was it a deliberate, calculated move to send a message, a way to add a new layer of deterrence and clarity in a world that's getting more and more uncertain?
Honestly, that is the question that analysts are still fiercely debating right now. And it just goes to show you that in the super high-stakes world of geopolitics, breaking a 50-year silence, well, it doesn't just answer questions, it creates a whole bunch of brand new ones.